She helped him choose a gift in a jewelry store, had no idea that this simple man was... Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The gentle hum of fluorescent lights filled the empty jewelry store as Noelle Parker straightened a display of gleaming necklaces for the third time that morning. Her reflection in the glass case caught her eye, caramel dark skin contrasting with the crisp white collar of her work shirt, straight black hair falling just past her shoulders. She reached up unconsciously to smooth her eyebrow, a habit that surfaced whenever her thoughts started to spiral. "First day flying solo," she whispered to herself, adjusting the name tag pinned to her shirt. After 2 weeks of training, her manager had finally deemed her ready to handle the morning shift alone. The weight of responsibility pressed against her chest, mixing with the familiar anxiety that had been her constant companion since moving to the city. The store wouldn't open for another 30 minutes, giving her time to pull out the small notebook she always carried. Its pages were filled with quotes, dreams, and fears, a private collection of her innermost thoughts. Today's entry was simple: Day 1 of proving myself, again. The sound of keys rattling against the back door made her quickly tuck the notebook away. Mrs. Hendricks, the store owner, walked in with her usual brisk energy. "Good morning, Noelle. Everything ready for opening?" "Yes, ma'am. I've checked all the displays and security systems just like you showed me." Mrs. Hendricks nodded approvingly, her silver hair catching the light. "Perfect. Remember, this isn't just about selling jewelry. It's about understanding stories. Every piece in here could be someone's promise, someone's memory." Noelle absorbed the words, adding them mentally to her collection of life lessons. Her Aunt Maylene, Aunt May as she'd always been known, had said something similar just that morning over breakfast. "Baby girl," Aunt May had declared, adjusting her vibrant yellow turban while sliding a plate of bacon across their tiny kitchen table, "everything in life tells a story. You just got to learn to listen." The memory of breakfast brought a mix of warmth and guilt. Aunt May had been coughing more than usual lately, though she insisted it was just seasonal allergies. Noelle had noticed the medicine bottles hidden behind the cereal boxes, but her aunt changed the subject whenever she tried to bring it up. The morning passed in a blur of customers, elderly women seeking repair services for cherished heirlooms, young professionals browsing for gifts, couples exploring engagement ring options with stars in their eyes. Noelle handled each interaction with careful attention, though her mind occasionally drifted to the stack of law books waiting at home. During a quiet moment, she pulled out her phone to check her study schedule. Property law readings for tomorrow, civil procedure assignment due Thursday, and a mock trial preparation that would require late nights at the library. The screen blurred slightly as fatigue crept in. "You can do this," she whispered, smoothing her eyebrow again. "One day at a time." The soft chime of the store's bell pulled her attention back to the present. A man walked in, his presence somehow both commanding and gentle. Tall, broad-shouldered, with kind blue-gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His well-maintained beard framed a thoughtful expression, and his work clothes, while clean and proper, showed signs of physical labor. "Welcome to Hendricks Fine Jewelry," Noelle said, her customer service voice automatically engaging. "How can I help you today?" The man approached the counter, running a hand along the nape of his neck, a gesture that softened his imposing frame. "Hi, I'm looking for a birthday gift for my sister. Something simple but special, if that makes sense. Of course, do you have any particular style in mind?" "To be honest, I'm a bit out of my depth here." He smiled apologetically, and Noelle noticed how it reached his eyes, creating small crinkles at the corners. "She's turning 30 next week. I fix networks for a living. Cables and connections make more sense to me than jewelry." Noelle found herself smiling back. "Well, connections are what jewelry is all about, in a way. Let's start with something simple. What's your sister's favorite color?" "Purple," he answered without hesitation. "She's loved it since we were kids." Noelle moved to a display case featuring amethyst pieces. These might be perfect then. They're elegant without being flashy. She carefully removed a silver necklace with a delicate amethyst pendant. "This one's particularly beautiful. The stone catches the light in a way that changes throughout the day." The man leaned in to look closer, and Noelle caught a subtle scent of clean soap and morning air. His name badge identified him as Lorenzo Owen, a technician from CityNet Solutions. "It's perfect," he said softly, then cleared his throat. "She'd love this. The way it catches the light. It reminds me of her, actually, always finding brightness in everything." As Noelle carefully wrapped the necklace, she found herself sharing glances with Lorenzo through the store's mirrors. Each time their eyes met, both would look away quickly, like teenagers caught passing notes in class. The interaction stirred something in her chest, a flutter of possibility that she immediately tried to suppress. Later that evening, as Noelle climbed the stairs to the small apartment she shared with Aunt May, exhaustion settled deep in her bones. The weight of her law books seemed to increase with each step. The sound of gospel music and the smell of comfort food greeted her before she even opened the door. "There's my girl," Aunt May called from the kitchen, her round figure swaying to the music as she stirred something on the stove. Her turban had shifted slightly to one side, giving her a charmingly crooked appearance. "How was your first solo flight?" Noelle dropped her bag and collapsed onto their worn but comfortable couch. "Good, I think. Didn't break anything, didn't lose anything, sold a few pieces." She hesitated, then added, "Met some interesting people." Aunt May's keen eyes caught the slight smile playing at the corners of her niece's mouth. "Interesting? Huh? Tell Aunt May all about these interesting people." "It's nothing," Noelle insisted, smoothing her eyebrow. "Just customers. One guy came in looking for a gift for his sister. He was—" She paused, searching for a neutral word. "Nice." "Nice?" Aunt May raised an eyebrow, her stirring spoon pausing mid-motion. "Girl, in all your years of existing, I have never heard you describe anyone as nice with that look on your face." A sudden coughing fit saved Noelle from having to respond. She watched with concern as her aunt turned away, shoulders shaking with each cough. "Aunt May, maybe we should see a doctor about that cough." "It's nothing, baby. Just this city air." "Taking some getting used to." Aunt May waved off the concern with her usual cheerful determination. "Now come help me with dinner, and you can tell me more about this nice customer of yours." As they worked together in their tiny kitchen, Noelle found her thoughts drifting back to Lorenzo's blue-gray eyes, and the way they seemed to see past her professional facade. She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on chopping vegetables and reviewing property law definitions in her head. She had too much at stake to get distracted. Her future, her family's hopes, her own dreams, they all depended on her focus and determination. Romance wasn't part of the plan, no matter how kind someone's eyes might be, or how genuine their smile. Still, as she lay in bed that night, her small notebook open beside her, she found herself writing, "Met someone today who reminded me that sometimes the most important connections aren't the ones we plan for." Then, shaking her head at her own sentimentality, she firmly closed the notebook and turned to her law textbooks. The city lights flickered outside her window, a constant reminder of all the dreams and challenges that had brought her here. Tomorrow would be another day of proving herself. Another day of balancing studies and work, of supporting Aunt May while pretending not to notice her hidden health concerns, of being everything to everyone while trying not to lose herself in the process. But tonight, just for a moment, she allowed herself to remember a pair of kind eyes and a gentle smile before turning her attention back to the responsibilities that couldn't wait. 3 days had passed since Lorenzo's visit to the jewelry store, but Noelle found herself unconsciously glancing at the door whenever the bell chimed. Each time she'd catch herself and return to whatever task was at hand, smoothing her eyebrow, in silent self-reproach. The morning rush at the university library was in full swing as Noelle claimed her usual corner spot, spreading her law books across the worn wooden table. The familiar scent of old books and coffee provided a comforting backdrop to her studying routine. Her property law professor had a reputation for calling on students at random, and she refused to be caught unprepared. "The rule against perpetuities," she muttered, highlighting another passage. "An interest must vest, if at all, no later than 21 years after the death of some life in being at the creation of the interest." The words blurred together as she suppressed a yawn. A text message notification lit up her phone screen. "Baby girl, don't forget to eat something. Love, Aunt May." Attached was a photo of the lunch bag Noelle had forgotten on the kitchen counter that morning. The sight made her smile and ache at the same time. She'd heard her aunt's muffled coughing through the walls last night, despite the radio playing to mask the sound. Still burning the midnight oil? Noelle looked up to find her classmate Deanna sliding into the chair across from her. With her immaculate business casual attire and perfectly styled braids, Deanna embodied the polished law student image Noelle sometimes felt she was still struggling to achieve. "More like trying not to drown in property law," Noelle admitted, reaching for her now cold coffee. "How do you always look so put together?" Deanna laughed softly. "Years of practice and way too much coffee. But seriously, you're one of the sharpest people in our class. Stop doubting yourself." She paused, studying Noelle's face. "Though you seem different today, distracted. Spill." Noelle focused on reorganizing her highlighters. "It's nothing. Just tired." "Uh-huh. And I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." Deanna leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Come on. We've been study buddies since orientation. I know you're just tired, face, and this isn't it." Before Noelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification from work. Mrs. Hendricks needed her to come in early. A shipment of new inventory had arrived ahead of schedule. Gathering her books, Noelle promised Deanna they'd catch up later. The jewelry store was quiet when Noelle arrived, early afternoon sun casting prisms through the display windows. As she helped Mrs. Hendricks unpack the new pieces, her mind wandered to Lorenzo. Had his sister liked the necklace? Would he come back? Should she even want him to? The bell chimed. Noelle's heart skipped before she could stop it. But it wasn't. Lorenzo. Just a couple looking for wedding bands. She helped them with practiced professionalism, ignoring the slight disappointment in her chest. Hours passed. She was updating the inventory system when the bell chimed again. This time, when she looked up, familiar blue-gray eyes met hers. Lorenzo stood just inside the door, adjusting the sleeve of his work shirt, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of nervousness. His tool belt was slung over his shoulder, and his hands showed traces of the day's work. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she echoed, her own voice softer than intended. "How did your sister like the necklace?" He moved closer to the counter, a gentle smile warming his features. "She loved it. Actually, that's partly why I'm here. The clasp seems a bit loose. I was hoping you could take a look." Noelle held out her hand, and Lorenzo placed the necklace in her palm. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. She focused intently on examining the clasp, aware of his presence just across the counter. "It just needs a small adjustment," she said finally, reaching for her tools. "It'll only take a minute." "No rush," Lorenzo replied, leaning slightly against the counter. "Unless you're busy?" Noelle glanced up, catching something hopeful in his expression. "Not too busy," she said carefully. "Quiet afternoon." As she worked on the clasp, Lorenzo spoke about his day, fixing network issues across the city, climbing through dusty crawl spaces, dealing with temperamental servers. His voice was steady and calming, like a warm drink on a cold day. "Sometimes I think I spend more time talking to machines than people," he admitted, running a hand along his nape. "At least machines are straightforward," Noelle found herself saying. "They either work or they don't. People are complicated." Lorenzo's eyes met hers. "Some complications are worth figuring out, though, aren't they?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Noelle's fingers stilled on the necklace as she looked up at him. For a moment, neither spoke, but the silence felt like a conversation of its own. The spell broke when Noelle's phone buzzed loudly. A text from Aunt May. "Groceries needed. Don't forget it's your turn to cook tonight." Reality crashed back in. She had a civil procedure assignment due tomorrow, groceries to buy, dinner to cook, and a test to study for. This, whatever this was with Lorenzo, wasn't part of the plan. "The clasp is fixed," she said, carefully wrapping the necklace. "Good as new." Lorenzo accepted the package, his fingers lingering near hers for a moment. "Thank you, I should probably—" He gestured vaguely toward the door, then hesitated. "Actually, I was wondering—" The bell chimed again as new customers entered. Noelle straightened professionally, though her heart was racing. "Have a good day, Mr. Owen." He nodded, understanding the shift. "You too, Ms. Parker." That evening, as Noelle pushed a shopping cart through the grocery store, her mind kept replaying the almost question in Lorenzo's voice. The weight of her. Responsibilities pressed down on her shoulders. Law school work, Aunt May's health, her own dreams. She couldn't afford distractions. Yet when she reached for a box of pasta, she found herself remembering the warmth of his fingers brushing against hers, the genuine interest in his eyes when he listened to her speak. Back at the apartment, she found Aunt May doing her evening exercises to a video program, her bright orange turban slightly askew. The older woman paused the video when she saw Noelle's expression. "Something on your mind, baby?" Noelle busied herself with unpacking groceries. "Just thinking about school stuff." "Mm-hmm. And does this school stuff happen to have blue-gray eyes and a nice smile?" Noelle nearly dropped the tomatoes she was holding. "Aunt May, what? These old eyes might be failing, but they can still spot love when it's blooming." Aunt May's teasing tone softened. "You know, it's okay to let good things happen, even when life is complicated." "I can't," Noelle said quietly, smoothing her eyebrow. "There's too much at stake. Law school, work. You... Me?" Aunt May stepped closer, placing her hands on Noelle's shoulders. "Baby girl, don't you dare use me as an excuse to hide from life. I raised you to soar, not to be afraid of leaving the ground." A coughing fit interrupted her words, and Noelle quickly guided her aunt to a chair, fetching water and trying not to notice how the coughs seemed deeper than before. Later that night, alone in her room, Noelle opened her notebook. Under the day's date, she wrote, "Sometimes the scariest part isn't failing. It's wanting something so much that succeeding would change everything." She closed the notebook and turned to her law books, but her mind kept drifting to blue-gray eyes and unasked questions, to the way silence could feel like the safest kind of conversation, and to the possibility that some complications might indeed be worth figuring out. The mock trial preparation room buzzed with nervous energy as law students shuffled papers and adjusted their formal attire. Noelle stood before a wall mirror, straightening her blazer for the 5th time. The case materials for their practice. Litigation felt heavy in her hands, a complex property dispute that would test everything they'd learned so far. "All rise," Professor Morgan's voice cut through the chatter. "Remember, even though this is practice, the skills you demonstrate today could shape your entire career. Miss Parker, you'll be presenting first." Noelle's heart jumped to her throat. She'd expected to go last, having time to observe others. Smoothing her eyebrow, she gathered her materials and approached the podium. Just as she opened her mouth to begin her opening statement, a loud crash echoed through the building, followed by darkness. Power outage. Emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow across the room. Professor Morgan sighed. "Everyone stay calm. Maintenance has been notified." Minutes ticked by. The backup generator should have kicked in, but something was clearly wrong. Noelle's carefully prepared notes were barely readable in the dim light, and her chance to prove herself was slipping away. "The IT team is sending someone up," Professor Morgan announced, checking his phone. "Apparently, there's an issue with the building's network affecting the backup systems." The door opened, and Noelle's breath caught. Lorenzo stepped in, tool belt at his waist, looking professional and focused. Their eyes met briefly, surprise mirrored in both expressions. "Afternoon," he said, addressing the room, but his gaze lingering on Noelle. "I'll need to check the main network panel. Shouldn't take long." As Lorenzo worked, Noelle tried to concentrate on her notes, but found herself watching his methodical movements. He seemed different here, more assured in his element. His hands moved with precise confidence across the equipment, a stark contrast to his nervous gestures in the jewelry store. "Almost got it," he murmured, more to himself than the room. Then, with a soft hum, the lights blazed back to life. The AI computer systems whirred awake, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "Thank you," Professor Morgan said. "Ms. Parker, whenever you're ready." Noelle stepped forward, but as she did, her heel caught on the carpet. Case files scattered across the floor. Before she could move, Lorenzo was there helping gather the papers. Their hands met over a document about easements and property rights. "You've got this," he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. Something in his voice steadied her. Noelle took her place at the podium, drew a deep breath, and began. The arguments flowed smoothly, her voice growing stronger with each point. When she finished, even Professor Morgan looked impressed. "Excellent work, Ms. Parker. A thoroughly professional presentation." As the next student took the podium, Noelle noticed Lorenzo finishing up his work. He closed the panel quietly and headed for the door, pausing only to give her a small nod. She wanted to thank him for the help, for the encouragement, for believing in her when her own confidence wavered. But the moment passed, and he was gone. Later that afternoon, during her shift at the jewelry store, Noelle found herself distracted by thoughts of their brief interaction. The way he'd appeared just when everything seemed to be falling apart, how natural it felt to have him there. "Earth to Noelle," Mrs. Hendricks's voice snapped her back to reality. "The insurance assessor needs last month's inventory reports." "Right, sorry." Noelle dove into the filing cabinet, grateful for the distraction. But as she sorted through papers, her phone buzzed with a text from Aunt May. "Baby girl, don't wait up tonight, book club running late." Noelle frowned. Aunt May never stayed out late on weeknights, and she'd been coughing more than usual at breakfast. Something felt off. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of customers and paperwork. As closing time approached, the bell chimed one last time. Lorenzo walked in, still in his work clothes, looking slightly uncertain. "Hi," he said, adjusting his sleeve. "I was in the neighborhood finishing up some calls, and I thought—" He trailed off, then started again. "You were really impressive today, in the mock trial." Noelle felt warmth spread across her cheeks. "Thank you for everything, helping with the papers, the encouragement." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said softly. "They wouldn't." A comfortable silence settled between them. Lorenzo moved closer to the counter, his presence both calming and exhilarating. "Listen," he began. "I know you're busy with school and work, but I was wondering if maybe—" Noelle's phone rang, Aunt May's ringtone cutting through the moment. Something in her aunt's voice when she answered made her blood run cold. "Noelle, I'm at the hospital. Just a precaution, but—" A coughing fit interrupted her words. "Which hospital? I'm coming right now." Noelle's hands shook as she gathered her things. Lorenzo's expression shifted from disappointment to concern. "What's wrong?" "My aunt. She's in the hospital. I have to go, but the store—" "I'll wait while you close up," he said firmly. "Then I'm driving you there." "You don't have to." "I want to." His voice was gentle but resolute. "Please let me help." 20 minutes later, they were in Lorenzo's truck, navigating through evening traffic. Noelle's fingers kept smoothing her eyebrow, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "She'll be okay," Lorenzo said quietly, reading her anxiety. "Focus on breathing." At a red light, he reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. The simple gesture grounded her, providing an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. They found Aunt May in the emergency room, hooked up to monitors, but still wearing her bright turban. Today's was purple with gold patterns. She tried to smile when she saw Noelle, but another cough shook her small frame. "It's just bronchitis," she managed between coughs. "Nothing to worry about." But the doctor's expression said otherwise. "Ms. Parker, the X-rays show something. Hey, we need to discuss—" Noelle felt her world tilting. Behind her, Lorenzo's steady presence provided silent support. She hadn't asked him to stay, but he had, positioning himself like a shield between her and whatever chaos might come. As the doctor explained the situation, chronic condition, required tests, potential treatments, Noelle felt tears threatening to fall. She wouldn't cry, couldn't cry. She needed to be strong to handle this too. A warm hand touched her shoulder. Lorenzo pressed a tissue into her palm, the gesture so natural it almost broke her composure completely. "I'm fine," Aunt May insisted from her bed. "Just need some rest," and another cough interrupted her brave face. You're staying overnight for observation, the doctor said firmly. We need to run more tests in the morning. Hours passed in a blur of forms and questions. Lorenzo disappeared briefly and returned with coffee and sandwiches. When Noel protested that he didn't need to stay, he simply pulled up a chair and said, "I know." Finally, around midnight, with Aunt May sleeping peacefully and initial treatments underway, the nurse insisted Noel go home and rest. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow," she promised her aunt's sleeping form. In Lorenzo's truck heading home, the events of the day felt surreal. The mock trial seemed like weeks ago instead of hours. "Thank you," Noel said softly, "for everything." Lorenzo glanced at her, his blue-gray eyes serious. "You don't have to thank me, that's what—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's what people do when they care." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. When they reached her apartment, Lorenzo walked her to the door. "Will you be okay?" he asked. Noel looked up at him, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm stronger with people who care." Their gazes held for a long moment. Then, with gentle determination, Lorenzo pulled her into a hug. Noel found herself melting into his embrace, letting out a shaky breath. She didn't know she'd been holding. "You're not alone in this," he murmured into her hair. When they finally parted, Noel felt both steadier and more uncertain than ever. She watched him drive away, then entered her empty apartment. On the kitchen counter, Aunt May's coffee mug still sat from that morning, next to her half-finished crossword puzzle. Opening her notebook, Noel wrote, "Sometimes strength isn't about carrying the weight alone. It's about learning to trust someone else to help you carry it." She closed the notebook and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more tests, more decisions. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the lingering warmth of Lorenzo's embrace and the comfort of knowing that whatever came next, she didn't have to face it alone. Morning light crept through the hospital window, painting soft shadows across Aunt May's sleeping face. Noel sat in the now familiar visitor's chair, law books spread across her lap, though she'd barely read a page in the last hour. A week had passed since the emergency room visit, and the initial diagnosis had led to more tests, more concerns, more whispered consultations in hospital hallways. Pneumonia complicated by an underlying condition. Words like chronic and progressive floated through her mind, each one carrying the weight of future worries. The doctors were optimistic about treatment, but the road ahead wouldn't be easy. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. Lorenzo stood there holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled of fresh pastries. He'd been appearing like this every morning before his work rounds, a steady presence in the chaos of her new reality. "You didn't have to come again," Noel said softly, though her heart lifted at the sight of him. "I know." He handed her a coffee, prepared exactly how she liked it, with just a hint of cinnamon. "How's she doing today?" "Better. The new medication seems to be helping with the coughing." Noel took a sip of coffee, letting its warmth spread through her tired body. They might release her tomorrow if the final tests look good. Lorenzo pulled up the other chair, careful not to make noise. "And how are you doing?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, almost broke through her carefully maintained composure. Noel smoothed her eyebrow, buying time to steady her voice. "I'm fine. Just need to figure out how to balance everything." "Everything meaning law school, work and being here, and finding a way to afford the treatments, and making sure she actually takes her medicine and—" Noel stopped herself, realizing she was letting her fears spill out. "Sorry, you probably have work to get to." Instead of leaving, Lorenzo reached over and gently closed the law book in her lap. "Talk to me," he said simply. Something about his calm presence made it feel safe to be vulnerable. "I'm scared," Noel admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just about Aunt May, but about failing her. She gave up everything to raise me after my parents died, and now when she needs me—" "You're here," Lorenzo interrupted softly. "Every morning, every evening, between classes, between shifts. That's not failing. But what if it's not enough? What if I can't handle it all? Then you let people help. His blue-grey eyes held hers steadily. You're not alone in this, remember? Before Noelle could respond, Aunt May stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Is that coffee I smell? She asked, her voice stronger than it had been in days. And fresh croissants, Lorenzo added, standing to adjust her pillows. The bakery downstairs just opened. Such a thoughtful young man, Aunt May said, giving Noelle a meaningful look. Reminds me of your Uncle Howard, always bringing me little surprises when we were courting. Aunt May. Noelle felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Lorenzo just smiled, helping Aunt May sit up. I'd love to hear about Uncle Howard sometime. Noelle doesn't share many family stories. Oh, I have stories. Aunt May's eyes twinkled despite her tired face. Like the time little Noelle decided she was going to be a Supreme Court justice at age 7. Wore her Halloween judge costume for 3 weeks straight. Really? Lorenzo glanced at Noelle, his expression soft with affection. Don't encourage. Her? Noelle groaned, but she was smiling too. It felt good to see Aunt May's spirit returning, even if it was at the expense of her dignity. A nurse entered with morning medications, and Lorenzo excused himself for work. At the door, he paused. I'm installing new networks on the 3rd floor today. Text me if you need anything. Noelle nodded, warmth spreading through her chest at his thoughtfulness. After he left, Aunt May didn't even try to hide her approval. That boy's got it bad for you, baby girl. He's just being kind, Noelle protested, though her heart fluttered at the thought. Kind is holding a door open. That man's been here every morning for a week, bringing coffee and hope in equal measures. Aunt May's voice softened. And the way he looks at you, that's not kindness. That's love growing. Love? Noelle nearly choked on the word. It's way too soon for... Too soon for what? A new voice joined the conversation. Deanna stood in the doorway, carrying a bright bouquet of flowers. Please tell me I'm finally going to hear about the mysterious man who's got my study partner distracted lately. There's nothing to tell, Noelle insisted, but Aunt May was already waving Deanna in eagerly. Come sit, child. Let me tell you about this wonderful young man who's been taking care of our Noelle. As Aunt May launched into a detailed description of Lorenzo's daily visits, Noelle buried herself in her property law notes, trying to ignore the knowing looks between her aunt and her friend. But her mind kept drifting to the gentle way Lorenzo had closed her book, how he seemed to understand exactly what she needed, without her having to ask. The morning passed quickly. Deanna left for class, promising to share her notes from the E. Lectures Noelle had missed. Doctors came and went, each bringing cautiously optimistic updates. Around noon, Noelle's phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. Taking my lunch break. Need anything from the cafeteria? Before she could reply, another message appeared. And don't say you're fine. I know you haven't eaten since that croissant. Noelle felt a smile tugging at her lips. How did he know her so well already? See? Aunt May said, catching her expression. That's not the smile of just friends. You should be resting, Noelle deflected, adjusting her aunt's blankets. I'll rest when you admit that boy's special. He is, Noelle conceded quietly, but that's what scares me. Aunt May reached for her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Love's supposed to be a little scary, baby girl. If it doesn't shake you up some, it's probably not the real thing. Who said anything about love? But even as she protested, Noelle knew something profound was shifting in her heart. Every morning she told herself not to expect Lorenzo's visits, and every morning her heart lifted at the sight of him. Every time she insisted they were just friends, her soul whispered that friends didn't make your world feel more complete just by existing in it. Later that afternoon, as she walked through the hospital corridors to get some air, Noelle found herself near the 3rd floor where Lorenzo was working. Through an open maintenance door, she heard his voice giving instructions to his team, confident and clear. She lingered for a moment, not wanting to interrupt, but drawing comfort from his nearness. As if sensing her presence, he looked up. Their eyes met across the hallway, and without a word he smiled, that special smile that seemed reserved just for her. In that moment, Noelle realized with startling clarity that Aunt May was right. This wasn't just kindness or attraction or friendship. This was the beginning of love, growing in the quiet moments between coffee cups and hospital visits, in shared glances and unspoken understanding, in the way he made her feel both stronger and more vulnerable at the same time. Back in her aunt's room, Noelle opened her notebook and wrote, "Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, in morning coffee and gentle hands, in knowing looks and silent support. And maybe that's the kind that lasts, the love that builds itself day by day, moment by moment, until you can't remember what life felt like before it began." She closed the notebook just as Lorenzo appeared with lunch for both her and Aunt May. As he arranged the food with careful attention to detail, Noelle watched him and allowed herself, for the first time, to acknowledge the truth she'd been trying to deny. She was falling in love with Lorenzo Owen, and it was both the most terrifying and most natural thing in the world. The first day of Aunt May's return home brought a flurry of activity to their small apartment. Noelle had spent the previous evening organizing medications, preparing meals in advance, and rearranging furniture to make everything more accessible. Now, watching her aunt settle into her favorite armchair, wrapped in a bright yellow shawl that matched her turban, Noelle felt both relief and anxiety. "Stop hovering, baby girl," Aunt May said, though her voice held more affection than reproach. "I'm not made of glass. The doctor said you need to take it easy," Noelle reminded her, adjusting a pillow for the third time. "No book club meetings, no dance exercise videos, and definitely no—" A knock at the door interrupted her list of restrictions. Lorenzo stood in the hallway, holding a toolbox and what looked like some electronic equipment. "Hi," he said, adjusting his sleeve with his free hand. "I thought maybe I could set up some monitors for tracking temperature and air quality." He looked almost shy about the suggestion. It might help with the breathing issues. Noelle felt warmth spread through her chest at his thoughtfulness. "For you don't have to—" "Let the man in, Noelle," Aunt May called from her chair. "Lord knows we could use some technical expertise in this house, and some good-looking company wouldn't hurt either." "Aunt May!" But Noelle was already stepping aside to let Lorenzo enter, their shoulders brushing slightly in the narrow doorway. The brief contact sent a familiar flutter through her stomach. As Lorenzo set up his equipment, explaining each piece to an intrigued Aunt May, Noelle found herself watching him. The way his hands moved with confident precision, so different from his nervous gestures. The gentle patience in his voice as he answered her aunt's questions. The way he seemed to fit naturally into their space, as if he'd always belonged there. "Now this one," he was saying, holding up a small device, "monitors humidity levels. Too much moisture can aggravate respiratory issues, but too little isn't good either. It'll send alerts to your phone if anything needs adjusting." "To my phone?" Aunt May's eyes lit up. "Well, isn't that something? Noelle, honey, you'll have to show me how to work those alert things." "I can help with that," Lorenzo offered. "I'll write down all the instructions, make it simple." A coughing fit interrupted Aunt May's response. Noelle rushed forward with water and medication, but Lorenzo was already there, helping her aunt sit up straighter, adjusting the pillow behind her back with natural ease. "Easy breaths," he said softly, like the respiratory therapist showed. "Us, remember? Us." The word struck Noelle. Somewhere in the past weeks, Lorenzo had become part of their us, present for doctor's visits, familiar with medications and treatments, integrated into their daily rhythms. When the coughing subsided, Aunt May patted Lorenzo's hand. "You're a good man, Lorenzo Owen. Reminds me of when Howard and I first met. He was always fixing things too, though back then it was radios, not all this fancy technology." "I'd love to hear that story," Lorenzo said, settling on the floor near her chair. Noelle watched as her aunt launched into the tale of meeting Uncle Howard at a radio repair shop in 1989. Lorenzo listened attentively, asking questions at just the right moments, his presence bringing a warmth to their home that had nothing to do with the temperature monitors he'd installed. Her phone buzzed, a reminder about tomorrow's civil procedure exam. Reality crashed back in. She still had chapters to review, cases to memorize. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down again. As if sensing her tension, Lorenzo glanced. Up. Their eyes met, and without words he understood. Standing smoothly, he gathered his tools. "I should let you get to your studying. The monitors are all set up, and I've programmed my number into the alert system in case there are any technical issues." "Thank you," Noel said softly, walking him to the door. "For everything." In the hallway they stood close, the narrow space making their proximity feel both intimate and uncertain. Lorenzo reached up, his fingers barely brushing her arm. "Noel, yes?" Her heart raced at the intensity in his eyes, but before he could continue, a door slammed somewhere in the building, breaking the moment. Lorenzo stepped back slightly, running a hand along his nape. "Good luck with your exam tomorrow. You'll do great." Noel watched him leave, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her. Back inside, Aunt May was wearing her knowing smile. "That boy was trying to ask you something important," she said, "and you were ready to hear it." "I have to study," Noel deflected, reaching for her law books. But her mind kept drifting to the unfinished moment in the hallway, to all the words hanging unspoken between them. Hours later, after Aunt May had gone to bed, Noel sat at their small kitchen table surrounded by textbooks and notes. The apartment felt different now, almost like it held echoes of Lorenzo's presence, in the quiet hum of the monitors he'd installed, in the detailed instructions he'd written in his neat handwriting, in the lingering sense of security his care had created. Opening her notebook, she wrote, "There are moments when everything changes, not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in quiet acts of care, in gentle touches that speak louder than words, in the way someone can make a space feel more like home just by being in it." A soft ding from one of the monitors drew her attention. The temperature had dropped slightly. Without thinking, she reached for her phone, but another message was already there. "Saw the temperature alert. Already adjusted the settings remotely. Don't worry, focus on studying, you've got this." Noel stared at Lorenzo's message, feeling something shift in her heart. This man who fixed not just machines but moments, who understood her without words, who had woven himself so seamlessly into her life that she couldn't imagine it without him anymore. A memory surfaced. Her 7-year-old self in that Halloween. Judge costume, declaring to Aunt May that she would never let anything distract her from her dreams. But now, looking at Lorenzo's message, she wondered if maybe some distractions weren't distractions at all, but rather the dreams themselves taking a different shape than expected. Rising quietly, she went to check on Aunt May. Her aunt slept, peacefully, her breathing steady, surrounded by the quiet guardianship of Lorenzo's monitors. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Noel noticed something she'd missed earlier. Lorenzo had labeled each device with not just instructions, but small, encouraging notes. "For better breathing, because your stories make the world brighter." "Temperature perfect for turban modeling sessions." "Air quality monitor, keeping watch while you rest." Each note showed how well he'd come to know them, how much he cared about the details of their lives. Noel felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of worry or exhaustion. They were tears of recognition, of finally seeing what had been growing all along, as natural as breathing. Back at her study table, she found herself reading the same legal paragraph over and over, her mind full of blue-gray eyes and gentle hands and unfinished sentences in hallways. Tomorrow's exam suddenly felt less daunting, not because it was less important, but because she was beginning to understand that having someone to lean on didn't make her any less strong. Her phone lit up with another message from Lorenzo. "Get some sleep, you're ready for tomorrow." 4 simple words, but they carried the weight of all his quiet support, all his unspoken care. Noel smiled, finally allowing herself to embrace the truth that had been building in her heart. Some things were worth the risk of changing everything. The jewelry store sparkled in the late afternoon sun, diamonds casting tiny rainbows across the walls. Noel stood behind the counter, absently polishing an already gleaming display case. Her civil procedure exam had gone well, better than well, actually, but her mind wasn't on law school today. It had been 3 days since the moment in the hallway with Lorenzo, 3 days of meaningful glances and almost conversations, of text messages that seemed to carry more weight than their simple words suggested. 3 days of wondering what he had been about to say before that door slammed. The bell chimed, and Noelle looked up to find Deanna striding in, her braids swinging with determined energy. "Okay, enough," Deanna declared, placing both hands on the counter. "You've been floating around campus like a lovesick teenager, and I need details." "I have not been floating," Noelle protested, smoothing her eyebrow. "And I'm working." "Please, the store's empty, and Mrs. Hendricks is at that jewelry convention in Boston." Deanna gestured around the quiet space. "So, spill. What's happening with Mr. Fixit?" Before Noelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Lorenzo. "Hope your day's going well. The humidity monitor caught something this morning. Stopped by to check on Aunt May during lunch. All good now. She made me try her new curry recipe." A smile spread across her face before she could hide it. "That's it," Deanna exclaimed. "That's the floating look I'm talking about. Girl, you are in deep." "It's complicated," Noelle sighed. But even she heard the weakness in her protest. "What's complicated? He's clearly crazy about you. He's practically part of your family already. Aunt May adores him, and don't think I haven't noticed how you light up every time he's around." "But what if—" Noelle stopped, trying to organize her swirling thoughts. "What if we try and it doesn't work? What if I mess everything up? He's become so important to Aunt May, to our whole situation. Or what if you don't try and spend the rest of your life wondering?" Deanna's voice softened. "Look, I know you've got a lot on your plate. Law school, work, Aunt May's health, it's a lot. But maybe having someone to share it with makes it lighter, not heavier." The bell chimed again. This time it was Lorenzo who walked in, looking slightly nervous but determined. He carried a small paper bag and what appeared to be a folder of some kind. "Hi," he said, his eyes finding Noelle's immediately. "Hi," she echoed, her heart doing that now familiar flutter. "Well, would you look at the time?" Deanna announced with exaggerated surprise. "I have that thing. You know, that very important thing, somewhere else." She winked at Noelle before heading to the door, pausing only to whisper, "Don't float away completely." Once they were alone, Lorenzo approached the counter, adjusting his sleeve. "I, brought you something." He placed the paper bag in front of her. "You mentioned the other day that you missed your mum's apple turnovers. I found a bakery that makes them the old-fashioned way." Noelle opened the bag, the familiar scent bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. "How did you remember that? I barely mentioned it weeks ago." "I remember everything you say," he admitted quietly. Then, as if realizing how intense that sounded, he quickly held up the folder. "I also wanted to show you something. Remember how you were worried about the medical bills?" Noelle tensed slightly. She hadn't wanted to burden him with their financial concerns. "I did some research," he continued. "There's this program for long-term care support. Aunt May would qualify. And here," he opened the folder, revealing carefully organized documents. "I found some grants for law students with family medical obligations. You could apply for both." Noelle stared at the papers, then at Lorenzo, overwhelmed by the thought and care behind this gesture. "You did all this research? I just want to help make things easier for you." He ran a hand along his nape. "Both of you. You're—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "You're important to me." The air between them felt charged with possibility. Noelle found herself moving around the counter, drawn toward him like a magnet finding its pole. "Lorenzo, The store phone rang, shattering the moment. Mrs. Hendricks calling about inventory numbers. By the time Noelle finished the call, the space between them had widened again, filled with unspoken words. "I should go," Lorenzo said softly. "You probably need to focus on work." "Wait." Noelle surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "Please." He waited, his blue-gray eyes watching her with that mixture of hope and uncertainty she'd come to know so well. "The other day, in the hallway," she began, smoothing her eyebrow nervously. "What were you going to say?" Lorenzo took a step. "Closer. I was going to ask if you'd like to have dinner with me, not coffee between hospital visits or quick lunches between your classes. Real dinner. Just us." "Like a date?" Noelle's voice was barely above a whisper. "Like a beginning," he answered. Then with gentle humor, "Though technically we've been sort of dating for weeks now, I just bring technical equipment instead of flowers." A laugh bubbled up from Noelle's chest, releasing weeks of tension. "You bring me way more than flowers. You bring peace and possibility. And..." This time, when Lorenzo stepped closer, neither of them pulled away. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb gently, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "And?" he prompted softly. Instead of answering, Noelle rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was gentle at first, a whisper of a kiss, but it held all the words they hadn't been able to say. Lorenzo's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and the world seemed to narrow to just this moment, just them. When they finally parted, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you helped me pick out that necklace for my sister." "Your sister's necklace?" Noelle laughed softly. "The one with the suspiciously loose clasp that needed fixing." "Hey, that clasp was genuinely loose, and eventually, after I might have fiddled with it a bit." They shared another laugh, still holding each other. Through the store windows, the setting sun painted everything in warm gold, making the moment feel almost magical. "So," Lorenzo said, pulling back slightly to meet her eyes. "Dinner?" "Dinner," Noelle agreed. Then, because honesty felt important, "I'm still scared. Of everything changing, of not being able to balance it all." "I know." He touched her cheek again. "But maybe some changes are worth being scared for, and maybe you don't have to balance everything alone anymore." Later that night, after Lorenzo had left with promises of dinner plans and several more kisses, Noelle opened her notebook. Under the day's date, she wrote, "Love doesn't always come in grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it comes in apple turnovers and technical manuals, in research about medical programs and gentle hands wiping away tears. Sometimes it's not about finding someone who changes your world, but someone who helps you carry it." She closed the notebook and touched her lips, still feeling the echo of their first kiss. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel overwhelming. It felt full of promise. Friday evening. Found Noelle standing before her bedroom mirror, smoothing her emerald green dress for the 10th time. Her reflection showed a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be their first real date, and somehow that felt more significant than all the quiet moments they'd already shared. "Stop fussing," Aunt May called from the doorway, her bright orange turban coordinating perfectly with her flowing caftan. "You look beautiful, baby girl. Are you sure you'll be okay?" Noelle turned to her aunt, smoothing her eyebrow out of habit. "I can tell Lorenzo we should reschedule if—" "Don't you dare!" Aunt May settled into Noelle's desk chair, her breathing steady and strong today. "I've got my monitors, my medication, and a new mystery novel. Plus Deanna's bringing over dinner and staying to watch that new legal drama with me." She grinned mischievously. "We're going to critique all the incorrect courtroom procedures." A knock at the front door sent Noelle's heart racing. She heard Deanna, who had arrived early, greeting Lorenzo. "Remember," Aunt May squeezed her, "and just because something's precious doesn't mean it has to be perfect." Noelle stepped into the living room to find Lorenzo in a charcoal grey suit that made his blue-grey eyes even more striking. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, and his expression when he saw her made her cheeks warm. "You look—" He paused, searching for words. "If you say nice, I'm sending you both back to romance school," Deanna interjected from the kitchen. Lorenzo laughed, the sound breaking through his nervousness. "I was going to say breathtaking, actually." He handed Noelle the flowers. "These reminded me of you. Beautiful but not delicate. Strong enough to grow anywhere." "Smooth," Deanna approved. "He can stay." After promises to call if anything changed with Aunt May, and several knowing looks from both Deanna and her aunt, Noelle found herself walking with Lorenzo through the early evening air. His hand found hers naturally, their fingers intertwining, as if they'd been doing this forever. "So," Noelle said, trying to calm her butterflies, "where are we going?" Lorenzo's eyes held a hint of mystery. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, surprising herself with how true it was. He led her to his truck, helping her in with gentle courtesy. They drove through the city, talking easily about their days, a difficult network installation for him, a challenging study group for her. It felt both familiar and new, like a favorite song played in a different key. When they parked, Noelle looked around curiously. They were at the edge of the city's botanical gardens, but it was well past closing time. "Don't worry," Lorenzo said, reading her expression. "I know someone who works here. Actually," he adjusted his sleeve slightly, "I help maintain their environmental control systems. They owed me a favor." He guided her through a side gate and along a winding path lit by subtle ground lights. They emerged into a glass-enclosed courtyard where a small table had been set for dinner, surrounded by blooming night flowers and softly glowing lanterns. "Lorenzo," Noelle breathed, taking in the magical setting. "Too much?" He ran a hand along his nape. "I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere we could just be us. And you mentioned once that you loved gardens, but never had time to visit anymore." Noelle turned to him, heart full. "It's perfect." Dinner was a delicious array of dishes from a local restaurant they'd both mentioned wanting to try. They talked about everything and nothing: childhood memories, future dreams, silly stories about their worst technical and legal mishaps. In the gentle evening light, surrounded by flowers that only bloomed at night, it felt like they were in their own private world. "You know," Lorenzo said as they shared a dessert of chocolate mousse, "I almost didn't come back to the jewelry store after buying my sister's necklace." "Really?" Noelle tilted her head curiously. "I was convinced you were way out of my league." "This brilliant law student with the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen," he met her eyes. "But then I kept thinking about the way you listened, really listened, when I rambled about network cables, and how your eyes lit up when you talked. About your aunt, I had to see you again." "I'm glad you did," Noelle said softly. "Even if you did have to sabotage a perfectly good necklace clasp. Worth it." His smile was tender. "Every nervous moment, every excuse to come back, all worth it to be here with you now." After dinner, they walked through the gardens, Lorenzo pointing out the environmental controls he'd helped install, Noelle sharing fragments of plant law history she'd studied. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by comfortable silences and gentle touches. Near a fountain filled with water lilies, Lorenzo pulled her close. "I know we're technically just starting," he said quietly, "but it feels like I've known you forever." "I know what you mean." Noelle rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "Like we've been writing this story all along, just in invisible ink." He tilted her chin up gently, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. This kiss was different from their first, unhurried, deep, full of promise. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Lorenzo touched his forehead to hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "Actually, no, I know I am." Instead of the fear she'd expected to feel at those words, Noelle felt peace wash over her. "I think I'm falling in love with you too. Or maybe I already have. Been between all the hospital visits and monitor installations and Apple turnovers." They shared another kiss, softer this time, before reluctantly acknowledging the time. As they drove home, their hands remained linked over the center console, and Noelle felt a new certainty settling in her heart. At her door, Lorenzo kissed her goodnight with such tenderness it almost brought tears to her eyes. "Sweet dreams," he murmured. Inside, she found Aunt May and Deanna still awake, clearly waiting up for her. Their eager expressions made her laugh. "Well?" Aunt May demanded. "Was it worth changing out of your study clothes for?" "It was." Noelle searched for words that could capture the evening's magic. It was the beginning of something real. Later, in her room, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Love isn't just grand gestures in garden courtyards or declarations under the stars. It's in the way he remembers tiny details from passing conversations, in how he makes space for all of me. The law student, the caregiver, the dreamer. It's in the perfect balance of holding me close while helping me stand strong." Tonight wasn't just a first date. It was a promise that some loves grow like night-blooming flowers, quietly, steadily, until suddenly you look up and realize your whole world is in bloom. She closed the notebook and touched the dried wildflower she'd saved from his bouquet. Outside, the city hummed its nighttime melody, but for once her mind wasn't on tomorrow's responsibilities. Instead, She thought of blue-grey eyes and gentle hands, of gardens at twilight and promises whispered against her lips. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lorenzo. "Thank you for trusting me with your evening, and your heart." Noelle smiled, typing back, "Thank you for making both so beautiful." As she drifted off to sleep, she realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't worried about balancing everything perfectly. Some things like love and trust and hope had a way of finding their own balance when you let them bloom in their own time. The autumn rain pelted against the hospital windows as Noelle paced the waiting room, smoothing her eyebrow repeatedly. Aunt May's routine checkup had turned into an extended stay when her breathing had suddenly worsened during the examination. Now 2 hours later, Noelle was still waiting for updates. "Here." Lorenzo appeared at her side, holding a cup of her favorite cinnamon coffee. He'd rushed over as soon as she'd called, still in his work clothes, tool belt exchanged for a worried expression. "Thanks." She accepted the coffee, letting his steady presence anchor her. "I should have seen this coming." She was more tired than usual this morning, but she insisted on making pancakes, said she was fine. "Hey!" Lorenzo pulled her gently into his arms. "This isn't your fault. You can't predict everything." Before she could respond, Dr. Martinez emerged from the treatment area. "Ms. Parker, your aunt is stabilized now. The change in weather triggered an inflammatory response in her lungs, but we've adjusted her medication. She'll need to stay overnight for observation." Noelle felt her knees weaken with relief. Lorenzo's arm tightened supportively around her waist. "Can we see her?" he asked, the "we" warming something in Noelle's heart despite her worry. Inside the room they found Aunt May propped up in bed, her turban slightly askew but her spirit undimmed. "Well, if it isn't my favorite couple," she said, voice raspy but determined. "Don't look so worried, baby girl. Just needed to give these doctors something to do on a slow day." "Aunt May," Noelle started, but tears choked off her words. "Now none of that." Aunt May reached for her hand. "The Lord ain't finished with me yet. Besides," she winked at Lorenzo, "I've got to stick around to see where this love story goes." Lorenzo moved to adjust her pillows with practiced care. "You know we're not going anywhere, right? Whatever you need, whenever you need it." "I know, sweet boy." Aunt May patted his hand. "That's why I can rest easy. My Noelle's got good backup now." Later that evening, after making sure Aunt May was comfortable for the night, Noelle and Lorenzo walked through the hospital corridors, hand in hand. The rain continued outside, creating a rhythmic backdrop to their footsteps. "You should go home," Noelle said softly. "You've got that big network upgrade tomorrow." "I'm where I need to be." Lorenzo stopped, turning to face her. "Unless, do you want me to go?" "No," she admitted, stepping closer to him. "I never want you to go, and that scares me sometimes. How much I've come to depend on you, how natural it feels to have you here." "Why does that scare you?" "Because," Noelle smoothed her eyebrow, gathering thoughts, "because what if something happens? To Aunt May, to us, to any of this. I've always been the one holding everything together, and now you're not doing it alone," Lorenzo finished gently. "That's not weakness, Noelle, it's love." She looked up at him, seeing the certainty in his blue-grey eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be all those legal terms you keep teaching." "Me?" His smile softened. "Come here." She melted into his embrace, letting out a shaky breath against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, the hospital's muted sounds fading around them. "You know what I think?" Lorenzo said finally, his voice rumbling under her ear. "I think you're still holding everything together. You're just letting me hold you while you do it." The truth of his words struck deep. Noelle tilted her face up to his, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted of coffee and understanding. When they parted, Lorenzo touched her cheek gently. "Let me take care of dinner tonight," he said. "I'll grab some food, meet you at your place. You can study while I set up a new humidifier in Aunt May's room. The weather report says this rain's staying for a while. You don't have to." "I want to." He kissed her forehead. "Partners, remember?" That word, partners, echoed in Noelle's mind as she drove home through the rain. 2 months into their relationship, and already Lorenzo had become essential to her world, not by taking over or trying to fix everything, but by standing beside her, supporting her dreams while sharing his own. At home, she changed into comfortable clothes and spread her law books across the kitchen table. Minutes later, Lorenzo arrived with bags of Thai food and a new humidifier. They fell into an easy rhythm, him setting up the equipment while she studied, occasionally reading interesting legal points aloud or asking his opinion on case scenarios. So, in this case, she explained between bites of pad thai, the question is whether the property easement extends to new technology installations. Sounds relevant to my work, actually, Lorenzo said, adjusting the humidifier's settings. Last week we had to negotiate access rights for fiber optic cables through an old building's infrastructure. Really? Noelle sat up straighter. That could make a great example for my property law paper. They spent the next hour discussing the intersection of technology and property rights, their different professional perspectives creating insights neither would have reached alone. When Noelle finally looked at the clock, she was surprised to find she'd covered more material than she'd expected. See? Lorenzo smiled, noticing her expression. Sometimes support means just being here while you do your thing. How do you always know exactly what I need? She moved to wrap her arms around him from behind as he finished programming the humidifier. Because I pay attention. He turned in her embrace. To every word, every worry, every dream. You're worth paying. Attention to, Noelle Parker. The rain drummed against the windows as they held each other in the quiet kitchen. Noelle breathed in his familiar scent, clean soap and subtle cologne and something uniquely Lorenzo, and felt her earlier fears settling into perspective. I love you, she whispered against his chest. Not falling in love anymore, but the certainty of love itself. Lorenzo's arms tightened around her. I love you too, all of you. The brilliant law student, the devoted niece, the woman who remembers how I take my coffee and argues property law with me at midnight. Later, after Lorenzo had left with promises to check on Aunt May before his morning installation, Noelle opened her notebook. She wrote, Love isn't just about the sunny days and garden dates. It's about holding hands in hospital corridors, about understanding silences and midnight worries. It's about finding someone who doesn't try to lift your world off your shoulders, but instead strengthens your stance so you can carry it better. Someone who knows that support sometimes means moving mountains, and sometimes just means being there while you move them yourself. She closed the notebook and went to check the key. Humidifier one last time. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lorenzo. Got home safe. Try to get some sleep. I'll bring breakfast to the hospital in the morning. We'll face whatever comes together. Reading his words, Noelle felt the last of her fear walls crumbling, because that's what real love was. Not the absence of storms, but the certainty of having someone to weather them with you. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning while Noelle was opening the jewelry store. She nearly dropped her phone when she saw the sender. Preston, White & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. They were offering her a paid internship for the upcoming semester, a rare opportunity that could set her entire career trajectory. Her hands trembled as she read the details. The position would provide invaluable experience, networking opportunities, and a significant stipend that could help with Aunt May's medical bills. It was everything she'd dreamed of. Except for one detail. It would require her to relocate to the firm's office in another city, 3 hours away. Noelle smoothed her eyebrow, mind racing. She could drive back on weekends, hire a part-time caregiver for Aunt May during the week. The monitors Lorenzo had installed would help track things remotely. It would be hard but manageable, and this opportunity. The store's bell chimed. Lorenzo walked in, carrying her morning coffee and wearing a broad smile. Guess who just landed a major contract? He set the coffee down, his blue-gray eyes bright with excitement. CityNet's expanding their coverage to underserved neighborhoods, and they want me to head the entire infrastructure project. Lorenzo, that's amazing. Noelle moved around the counter to hug him, momentarily pushing aside her own news. It's a huge opportunity, he continued, holding her close. Better position, better pay, chance to make a real difference in the community. And, his voice softened, it means I can finally start thinking about our future. Together. Noelle's heart clenched. She pulled back slightly, smoothing her eyebrow again. What's wrong? Lorenzo's expression shifted to concern. You're doing the eyebrow thing. She swallowed hard. I just got an offer too, an internship with Preston, White & Associates. That's fantastic. Then, noting her continued tension, isn't it? It's in River Grove, 3 hours away. The silence that followed felt heavier than any they'd shared before. Lorenzo's hands dropped to his sides as he processed the information. For how long? He finally asked. 6 months, maybe longer if they offer a permanent position afterward. Noelle moved back behind the counter, needing the physical barrier to think clearly. It's an incredible opportunity, the kind that could set up my whole career. Of course it is. Lorenzo's voice was carefully neutral. You deserve incredible opportunities. I haven't accepted yet. I need to think about Aunt May, about... She met his eyes. About us. Don't. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the counter. Don't let us be the reason you hold back. This is your dream. But what about your project here? What about everything we've built? We'll figure it out. But his hand went to his nape, betraying his uncertainty. 3 hours isn't that far. We can visit on weekends, call every day. The store's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. By the time Noelle finished with the customer inquiry, Lorenzo had been called away to an emergency network issue. We'll talk more later, he promised, kissing her quickly before leaving. But something felt unfinished, unsettled. That evening, Noelle found Aunt May in her favorite armchair, surrounded by the soft hum of monitoring equipment. Her aunt took one look at her face and patted the ottoman beside her. All right, baby girl, tell me what's troubling that heart of yours. Noelle explained the situation, her words tumbling out in a confused rush. When she finished, Aunt May adjusted her turban thoughtfully. Sounds like you've got yourself a crossroads moment. What should I do, Aunt May? Now you know I can't answer that for you. Her aunt's voice was gentle but firm. But I can tell you this, sometimes life's biggest choices aren't about right or wrong. They're about what story you want your heart to tell. But what about you? Your health is not your burden to carry alone. Aunt May reached for her hand. Lorenzo's monitors work just fine from a distance, and I've got my whole church family looking out for me. Don't you dare use me as an excuse to hide from your destiny. And, Lorenzo? Noelle whispered. What? If distance changes everything? That boy? Aunt May laughed softly. He looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. Distance might change your schedule, but it won't change that kind of love. Later that night, unable to sleep, Noelle drove to their spot, the botanical gardens where they'd had their first date. Using the access code Lorenzo had given her, she made her way to the glass-enclosed courtyard. The night-blooming flowers were open, their fragrance filling the air with memories. She didn't hear him approach, but somehow wasn't surprised when Lorenzo's arms wrapped around her from behind. I had a feeling I'd find you here, he murmured against her hair. How did you know? Because I know you. He turned her gently to face him. Just like I know you've been torturing yourself trying to make an impossible choice perfect. I don't want to lose this, Noelle admitted, touching his face. Lose us. Hey. Lorenzo caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. You're not losing anything. You're gaining an opportunity to shine even brighter, and I'll be right here, cheering you on from whatever distance necessary. But your project, your promotion, will still be here. The communities we're connecting aren't going anywhere. His eyes held hers steadily. Noelle, love isn't about keeping each other small. It's about supporting each other's growth, even when it's scary. Even if it means only seeing each other on weekends. Even if it means video calls and text. Messages and missing you like crazy. He smiled softly. I'd rather have you from a distance chasing your dreams than have you close and wondering what if. Tears spilled down Noelle's cheeks. When did you get so wise? Must be all those property law discussions. He wiped her tears gently. Take the internship. Show them how brilliant you are. I'll be here. making sure Aunt May's monitors are working perfectly and counting the days, until I can hold you again. I love you, Noel whispered against his lips. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good kind of terror though, right? Lorenzo kissed her deeply, as if memorizing the feeling. Like standing on the edge of something. Magnificent. They stayed in the garden until dawn began to paint the sky, talking about logistics and plans, sharing fears and hopes, holding each other through the uncertainty. When Noel finally opened her notebook that morning, she wrote, "Love isn't always about choosing between heart and dreams. Sometimes it's about finding someone who makes room for both, who understands that growth requires space and trust requires freedom. Someone who knows that true love isn't about holding tight, but about holding steady, steady enough to let each other fly." Her phone buzzed with a message from Lorenzo, "Just reminding you that you're amazing and that 3 hours is nothing compared to forever. Go shine, beautiful. I'll be here, loving you and fixing things until you come home." Reading his words, Noel felt a new kind of certainty settling in her heart. Because sometimes the biggest leap of faith isn't in leaving or staying. It's in believing that real love grows stronger through every challenge, every distance, every change. 6 months could feel like an eternity or the blink of an eye. For Noel, standing in the familiar warmth of Hendrik's fine jewelry on a bright spring morning, it felt like both. The store hadn't changed. Same gleaming cases, same soft lighting, same gentle hum of the air conditioning. But she had. Her internship at Preston White and Associates had ended yesterday, culminating in a job offer that had exceeded her wildest expectations. Now, back in the city where her heart had stayed, she found herself drawn to where everything began. Mrs. Hendricks had welcomed her with open arms and knowing eyes. "He still comes in, you know," she said while sorting through new inventory. "Every week, like clockwork. Always finds some reason to check the security systems or adjust the lighting." Noel smiled, touching the delicate lotus pendant around her neck, Lorenzo's gift before she'd left for River Grove. Despite the distance, despite the challenges, they'd kept their promise. Video calls, weekend visits, endless text messages. They'd built their love stronger through the separation, learning to hear the words hidden in silences and to find comfort in digital connections. The bell chimed. Speaking of, Mrs. Hendricks winked, disappearing into the back room. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, silhouetted by morning light. He looked the same, yet somehow more confident, more settled, more utterly essential to her world. His blue-grey eyes found hers immediately, and 6 months of distance vanished in a heartbeat. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she echoed, moving around the counter toward him. They met in the middle of the store, where they'd first talked about sisters' gifts and loose clasps. His arms wrapped around her, and Noel breathed in his familiar scent, clean soap, subtle cologne, and pure Lorenzo. "Welcome home," he murmured against her hair. "I got the job offer," she said into his chest. "Full position, incredible. Benefits, career fast track." Lorenzo pulled back slightly to see her face. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of—" He paused, noting something in her expression. "What aren't you telling me?" Noel smoothed her eyebrow, a gesture that now made him smile with recognition. "They want me to work in their main office in River Grove." The silence that followed held 6 months of longing, of growth, of choices yet to be made. Lorenzo's hands remained steady on her waist, his eyes never leaving hers. "Before you say anything," Noel continued quickly, "I need to show you something." She reached into her bag, pulling out a folder similar to the one he'd brought her months ago with medical support programs. Inside were housing listings, network infrastructure plans, and a proposal for a new tech initiative in River Grove's underserved communities. The firm has connections with major tech companies looking to expand their community outreach, she explained. They need someone who understands both the technical and legal aspects, someone who's proven they can manage large-scale infrastructure projects while maintaining community focus. Understanding dawned in Lorenzo's eyes. "Someone like me. The position would be perfect for you. Better pay, bigger impact, chance to make real change." Noel touched his face gently. "But only if it's what you want. I've also got listings for places here. And the firm's local office has an opening. We can make it work either way. Lorenzo caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, an echo of that night in the garden when they'd faced their first real challenge. You did all this research? Made all these plans? I learned from the best. She smiled. From someone who taught me that love means making room for both dreams and reality. Instead of answering immediately, Lorenzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Noelle's breath caught. I was going to do this differently, he said, softly. Had this whole plan involving the botanical gardens and night-blooming flowers. But standing here, where everything started, where I first fell in love with your smile and your strength. He sank to one knee. This feels right. Tears blurred Noelle's vision as he opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the morning, light like hope made tangible. Noelle Parker. Lorenzo's voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. These past 6 months taught me something important. They taught me that distance can't diminish real love. It just proves how unshakable it is. Every video call, every weekend visit, every text message only made me more certain that you're the one I want to build a life with. Whether that life is here or in River Grove or somewhere else entirely doesn't matter, as long as we're building it together. He took her hand, his touch as gentle as always. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in all things? Your support through every challenge, your— Yes, Noelle interrupted, dropping to her knees to join him on the floor. Yes, to everything. To anywhere. To always. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted of joy and promise and forever. When they finally parted, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. River Grove, he said firmly. Are you sure? Your work here can expand there. You're right about the opportunity, but more than that. He helped her to her feet, keeping her close. I want to see you shine at full brightness. Besides, his smile turned playful, someone needs to maintain all those environmental control systems in your fancy law firm. A commotion at the door made them both turn. Aunt May stood there resplendent in a turquoise turban, her breathing strong and steady thanks to months of proper treatment. Beside her, Deanna was trying and failing to look innocent. Well? Aunt May demanded. Did my future nephew-in-law finally pop the question? You knew? Noelle asked, laughing through happy tears. Baby girl, who do you think helped him pick out the ring? Aunt May moved forward to embrace them both. And before you start worrying, I've already talked to my sister in River Grove. She's got a spare room and could use some company. Plus, she winked, I hear they've got an excellent respiratory specialist there. You've all been planning this? Noelle looked between them in amazement. Love takes a village, Deanna said, joining their group hug, especially when the people in love are as stupidly noble and self-sacrificing as you two. Later that evening, in the botanical garden courtyard where they'd shared so many moments, Noelle and Lorenzo sat surrounded by blooming flowers and twinkling lights. Their friends and family had insisted on an impromptu engagement celebration, but now, in the quiet aftermath, they had a moment just for them. Happy? Lorenzo asked, holding her close. Complete, Noelle corrected, watching her ring catch the light. Like everything that seemed complicated, finally makes perfect sense. Opening her notebook one last time, she wrote, Love isn't a destination you reach or a problem you solve. It's a journey you choose to take together, a story you write day by day, moment by moment. It's finding someone who makes the hard choices easier, because they help you carry them. Someone who knows that life's greatest adventures aren't about the place you're going, but about who you're becoming together along the way. She closed the notebook and turned to kiss Lorenzo, her fiancé, her partner, her heart's greatest certainty. Above them, the stars emerged in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had grown like their night-blooming flowers, gradually, beautifully, and with perfect timing. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't about dramatic gestures or grand sacrifices. Sometimes they're written in coffee cups and monitor installations, in hospital visits and law books, in the quiet ways two people choose each other every day. Sometimes they're told in the spaces between words, in the silence between heartbeats, in the smiles that say everything without saying anything at all. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they're just the beginning of an even greater adventure. 1 year later, the small garden behind their River Grove home bloomed with night flowers, their fragrance filling the evening air. Noelle sat on the porch swing, her old notebook in her lap, watching Lorenzo install motion sensor lights along the pathway. Some things never changed. He still fixed everything with the same careful attention, and she still found herself falling more in love with each passing day. A little to the left, Aunt May called from her comfortable chair, her bright yellow turban matching the marigolds she'd insisted on planting among the evening primrose. Her breathing was stronger these days, thanks to the specialist who'd become more like family than doctor. Perfect, Noelle agreed, smiling as her husband, that word still gave her butterflies, adjusted the light exactly as her aunt had suggested. Lorenzo joined them on the porch, automatically reaching for Noelle's hand. His wedding ring caught the light from his newest installation, and she remembered their simple ceremony in the botanical garden courtyard where they'd first admitted their love. Mrs. Hendricks had cried almost as much as Deanna, who'd served as both maid of honor and impromptu legal consultant for their vows. Their life wasn't perfect. They both worked long hours, she building her legal career while he expanded his community technology initiative. But it was perfectly theirs, built on quiet moments and steady love, on morning coffees and evening talks, on the understanding that grew deeper with each passing day. "Look what I found while unpacking that last box," Noelle said, showing Lorenzo her old notebook. "Remember what you wrote in it on our wedding day?" He smiled, reading his own words from the page. "To the woman who taught me that some connections don't need Wi-Fi. They just need patience, trust, and a little bit of technical support. You two are sweeter than my sweet potato pie," Aunt May declared, but her eyes were soft with joy. "Now who's going to help me hang these new wind chimes? I heard they're good for the garden's energy." As Lorenzo rose to help, giving Noelle a quick kiss, she opened to a fresh page in her notebook and wrote one final entry. "Some love stories don't end. They just keep beginning, every day, in all the small moments that make a life beautiful. In the way he still brings me coffee every morning. In how we've learned to hear I love you in comfortable silences. In the home we've built filled with night-blooming flowers and morning smiles. Because true love isn't about the big moments that change everything. It's about all the tiny moments that make everything worth changing for." She closed the notebook, joining her family in the garden they'd grown together, under stars that had witnessed their journey from the start. And if anyone asked, she would tell them that the best kinds of happily ever afters aren't endings at all. They're just beautiful new beginnings, blooming one quiet moment at a time. Tell us, if you had to choose between the love of your life and your dream job in another city, just like Noelle faced, what would your decision be? Do you believe it's possible to have both, or would you inevitably have to give up one for the other? Your participation in this channel means a lot to us. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.